relevance from some of these ancient traditions that probably took place thousands of years ago, and they hold true. They are relevant to this day.
Yes,
To
there are. and
Wow.
i'll and I'll tell you why. Because common sense doesn't change. Times we were told that Ramayana is only myth, there is nothing true to it. But I had traveled the ancient world so much, and once I started studying the Valmiki Ramayana, I realized that, oh, this is something I've seen here. So for example, gold plated houses, I said I've seen this in Peru. What is 9 o'clock? We lose GMT. Okay, then who knows who was born at what time? But the Hindu Kundli, how it is positioned, is more accurate, and therefore, in order to have the timing accurate, that is why they invented mathematics. Hora in Spanish, Hora, which comes from the Sanskrit hora, which means aho ratri. So ho from aho and ratri ra, ho ra. And that divides the whole day according to the planetary influence. Ramji had a horse, had a pet elephant. His name was, yeah, he had a pet elephant. It's called Shatrunjay. Ayodhya is called Ayodhya because it is a yudhya. It cannot be fought. It cannot be assailed. It cannot be conquered. A yudhya, that you cannot fight. Danav, who are against each other, and there is Sur and Asur, who are against each other, and there are Manav and Rakshas, who are against each other.
So when you say cradle of our civilization, do you mean in terms of species?
The streets of Ayodhya, and Sanskrit में लिखा है, नित्य संचित थे जल से. नित्य संचित, that means constantly watered. The other thing is that there were flowers on the streets, or flower petals on the streets constantly. Like they were, the streets were laid with flowers. So I remember asking this question to my sir, and he said he didn't know the answer to that as well.
Hello, everybody, and a very, very warm welcome to this very, very interesting conversation that we are about to have today. We are actually gathering to celebrate a momentous milestone, the 1 year anniversary of the grand opening of the Ram Mandir in Ayodhya, an event that holds profound cultural, spiritual, and historical significance for millions across the globe. On the 22nd of January 2024, the temple was inaugurated with great reverence and joy, marking the culmination of a centuries-long journey to restore Ayodhya as a sacred birthplace of Prabhu Sri Ram. And today I am absolutely feel privileged to welcome Neena Rai ji with us to our conversation. Neena ji is the author of the critically acclaimed book Amazing Ayodhya, a masterful work that delves deep into the history, culture, and spiritual significance of one of India's most revered cities. With meticulous research and a passion for storytelling, Neenaji has brought to life the essence of Ayodhya, offering its readers a fresh perspective on its ancient origins and timeless relevance. Thank you so much, Neena ji, for joining us today. As I said, it's an absolute privilege for me. My first question is for us, for most of us, हम सब के लिए. हम लोग अयोध्या बचपन से सुनते आ रहे हैं as the birthplace of Prabhu Sri Ram. But for us, it used to be just that, a sacred city, an ancient city, a Vedic city. But after reading your book, आपके पुस्तक पढ़ने के बाद, we realized that it is so much more. So, if you can tell us a little bit about your inspiration and your journey from the moment that you felt that you needed to tell the story to when you actually published the book, just share with us.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. And truly, it's a delight talking to people who are interested in ancient history, and who've read my book. And see, since I was a young kid, I was a devotee. So this is the first starting point. And I remember, and if you see my book, I have these two books, Adbhut Ayodhya and Amazing Ayodhya. So in the beginning of the book, I have dedicated this to my grandmother, because when I was growing up, she was quite an influence on me in studying all of this. Um, so when I was young, I used to keep talking of Devis and Devtas and Ram Bhagwan and Sita Mata, and so she said, "Well, if you want to know the truth, then you must learn the Valmiki Ramayana." So for many years in the beginning, life was about having a career, doing something, achieving something, earning money. And then I decided to come back to India after many years living abroad. So once I was back and I was settled, I started studying Sanskrit. And one of the reasons I studied Sanskrit is so that I could understand the Dharmic scriptures, because whenever we study only the English words, so whenever I would study the Sanskrit, I would feel that no, the essence is not exactly captured, or that there is a wrong meaning, or that the wrong word is written as an explanation, or that in certain places I've found people absolutely twisting the meaning as well. So therefore, that inspired me to learn Sanskrit. And then once I started studying Sanskrit, my aim was to read the Valmiki Ramayana, to see and read for myself without an interpreter telling me what it actually meant, or without me depending on Sanskrit, on English, to be able to understand the meaning. Of course, when I was reading, I studied Sanskrit, I studied the English version and the Hindi version, and trust me, it was a delightful experience to understand what was going on. Once I started reading the Valmiki Ramayana, it totally opened my eyes to the way ancient India was. And my book, Amazing Ayodhya, only captures a bit of ancient India. There is still a large amount of ancient India that we don't know, that is not out to the public. So it was really enlightening. It was really great, and it was fascinating. And every time I discovered something new, I would talk about it to people, and I would tell them, this happened and that happened. And they'd look at me very quizzically, as if, what am I talking about? Then I realized that if I have this knowledge only with myself, people, I'm going to be the alien person in the crowd. So I said, let me write a book, let the whole world know, because then by the time that because knowledge has, it disseminates amongst people, and then it becomes common knowledge. So first esoteric knowledge, so once I did that, then I realized that there are more people who kind of agree or have accepted certain facts that I have taken out in the book. And truly, that was quite delightful.
Thank you so much, Ninaji. I can only imagine, how fascinating and interesting your journey must have been. But I'm sure it was fascinating and interesting. But at the same time, I'm sure there were a lot of challenges.
Yes.
I can only, imagine what kind of challenges or roadblocks or difficult days and difficult nights you would have faced. So, what kind of challenges did you face while piecing together, especially the research? I think for a book like this, the most important aspect is the research part. If you can just, share with us the kind of challenges and the difficulties that you faced
The
when you were
first
attempting.
the first thing that I faced was, in the beginning, I went to take public classes for Sanskrit, like, group classes for Sanskrit. I soon realized that my hunger for knowledge was so deep that they weren't cutting it for me. And so then I looked for tutors, and I had a private tutor for a bit. And then my sir resigned, and he went some, I mean, he retired, and he went out of Delhi. Then for the longest time, I couldn't find somebody who could actually tell me the true meanings, who would actually explain the concepts. Because in the Valmiki Ramayana, there are lots of just abstract, and it's not abstract, it makes sense there. So I'll give you an example. The first example is, it says that the streets of Ayodhya, and Sanskrit mein likha hai, nitya sanchit the jal se. Nitya sanchit, that means constantly watered. And the other thing is that there were flowers on the streets, or flower petals on the streets constantly. Like, they were, the streets were laid with flowers. So I remember asking this question to my sir, and he said he didn't know the answer to that as well. And I said, if it agar wo nitya sanchit ho raha hai, if there is constant water, what is it? Are there water fountains that are doing it? Because we're not reading about water fountains, right? And how are the flowers falling? Is it because that the trees are lined with evergreen flowers, like evergreen trees of them, but there are like all season flowers? I said, are the petals falling? Like, how does it work? And he said he didn't know the answer. So I was very gobsmacked, because then that meant that I had to research who is watering. If it's not happening automatically, that means somebody is doing it. Then that took me to research on Bhishti, that there were people called Vrishtikar who were, putting water on the streets, and perhaps they or somebody else was also putting flower petals on the streets, and flower petals are a sign of welcome in traditional Hindu culture. And so this was one part, which is a very interesting challenge. The other challenge that I faced after my book had come out and after my research is that people started, they thought that I didn't do the work that I did. They thought somebody else did it for me. And um and that it wasn't my work. I just compiled it, which is untrue, because I did all the work. And so my thing was, okay, so if somebody had this knowledge and somebody was sitting on this data, why didn't they publish the book before I did?
That's exactly the most logical question that would come to anybody's mind.
Yeah.
Uh, Neena ji, Ayodhya,
Mhm.
just आपने in the book you have described Ayodhya as a very planned city. Now,
Yes,
when we think about Ayodhya, the thing that comes to our mind is it's an ancient city. It's
correct.
but आपने जिस तरह से describe किया है in terms of its infrastructure, the architecture, urban planning, it is quite progressive. Was that really how it was?
Yes,
I
it
mean, if
was.
you could just share with us a little bit about
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So, for example, on page number 90, I've given the layout of a Rajdhanya city. So, Rajdhanya city is the capital city of ancient India. So, this is how the capital city was planned out. Now, if you take a close look, it has a grid pattern network, or a grid. It's designed in a grid pattern. So, a grid pattern is very, very important. And a grid pattern, by the way, was practiced by ancient Indians. And it is in Vastu Shastra that you create cities like this, for the ease of transport and for the ease of commuting. Because you see, in ancient times, people used to either walk on foot or used to have chariots or elephants or horses. That meant that what was the challenge was to go from part A of the city to part B of the city, let's say from the north to the south and from the east to the west, in as many ways. And the most amazing part about the grid pattern network, or the grid pattern layout of streets, is that even today, the first world or the modern world has it. So we see the grid pattern network in, let's say, cities like New York, Chicago, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and even in Chandigarh we have that layout. And that layout is one of the most suited layout for modern cities in the world. And imagine we had these cities in the ancient times. And when other ancient cities have been excavated, let's say, for example, Dholavira, and I've given the picture of Dholavira in the book as well, you will notice that they are the same rectangular patterned cities with the citadel in the center. So what does that tell us? Even today, Delhi is not as rectangular as it should be, right? Ideally, this is according to Vastu, this is how it should be. But in the ancient times, our ancestors were very particular about following Vastu. And Ayodhya, so for example, we take a look at page number 59, and on page number 59, just see the layout, and you see the matching layout on this, right? Now, do you understand? So, Ayodhya in the ancient times was a prototype, because Vastu gives you the layout of many cities depending on the flora and the fauna and the land and water. So, you make the best cities depending on what are the conditions that you have. And therefore, they executed these cities. And the rest of the cities across the world are copies of Ayodhya, and Ayodhya used to be the prototype.
So fascinating to know that, that one of our. So does that mean that there must be then a very interesting history of Ayodhya even before the birth of Prabhu Sri Ram?
Yes.
So just tell us a little bit about that as well.
So we assume Ayodhya is famous because of Bhagwan Sri Ram. But the point is that Ayodhya is much, much, much famous even before the birth of Sri Ram. So in Valmiki Ramayana, it says, Ayodhya nam nagri tatra asit lok vishruta. That a city named Ayodhya exists in the world, which is lok vishruta. Lok is the whole of planet Earth. So in the whole of Earth, there is a very famous city called Ayodhya. Manuna Manavindren Yapuri Nirmata Swam. So Manu, the man, the king, the Indra amongst humans, has established the city Swam Nirmata Swam. So he has established this city himself. And this I have given in my first chapter. If you see the first chapter, and Ayodhya is also a Saptpuri, which is a Moksha-dayak Saptpuri, like Ayodhya, Kashi, all of these cities. So therefore, and Ayodhya is also, when we speak of Manu, a lot of people do not know who is Manu, and I've given quite an in-depth information about Manu. So Manu is the progenitor of the human species. He's the one who establishes humans again after the pralaya or after the deluge, right? Because a lot of species disappeared from Earth because of the floods. And he's the one who got us back on earth. This is a, and that is why the word, even the English word man, is derived from the Sanskrit word manu, and from manav means the progeny of Manu. So all of us, and by me progeny of Manu I mean the Homo sapiens, which is who we are, right? Today we call ourselves Homo sapiens. So therefore Ayodhya has been there. It is the cradle of human civilization as per the Vaishnavas for this Manvantar. There are many Manvantars, right? There are 14 Manvantars in total. So Ayodhya is the cradle of human civilization from where we have come according to our scriptures.
So when you say cradle of our civilization, do you mean in terms of species or exactly because when we talk about different kinds of species that existed back then, so there was a bit of I mean, as and when the yogs changed, the species also changed. So, is
Yes.
there any mention of that in our scriptures?
Yeah, yes, there is. In fact, human civilization, Manav, we come from Ayodhya. That is our capital. That is Manu, the progenitor of the human species. That is why the Ikshvaku, the first kings, the firstborns ruled. And that is why Ram is also important, because his job was to protect the human species. And in the ancient times, there were many different species who were inimical to the human species. So, for example, the Rakshas. The Rakshas were a predatory species who were preying on us, who would abduct our women, who would kill our men, who would destroy our havan, our puja, and they did it for fun. And you see, one of the descriptions of Rakshas is जिससे अपनी रक्षा की जानी चाहिए, from whom you should protect yourself. So why do you need to protect yourself? And then if you read the further descriptions of Rakshas, it says that they eat meat, they eat human meat, they are cannibals. And throughout the Valmiki Ramayana, there is reference to their cannibalism. There is reference to them preying on us and eating. They ate raw meat, they ate humans, and they preyed on us, and they enjoyed killing us. So we had so there is Dev, Danav, who are against each other. and there is Sur and Asur who are against each other, and there are Manav and Rakshas who are against each other in three different. And then they have made, their pacts together. So, for example, there was Dev Asur Asur Sangram, right? So Dev were fighting with the Asurs. So who was helping the Dev? The humans, which is Manu and people from Ayodhya were helping. So Raja Dashrath was helping the Dev, and the Rakshas were helping the Asur. And in this Sangram is where Kekai ji saves the life of Dashrath ji twice, and therefore she gets those two boons. And I've written about this in the book as well. And so, yeah, so there are these species who don't exist on Earth anymore. And at that ancient time, we simultaneously existed with each other. Those species, by the way, are not on Earth anymore. And if we read the Valmiki Ramayana, and by the time we come to Mahabharat, you will notice that Hanumanji, who was a Vanar, let's say we call him a monkey, but he could have just been another species. So, for example, we have these extinct species called Homo neanderthalis, Homo erectus, Homo this, Homo that. I mean, you just Google it and you'll see these 10, 20 species coming. And when you see the Valmiki Ramayana, you have the description of these species. Let's say they are Reach, they are Vanar, they are Rakshas, they are Asur, they are Daitya. So there are so many of these species. When sometimes what happens is that we take one part of our practical history, and then we have our documented history here. We are not able to join the two, we are not able to connect the two, and understand what's going on. But Hindu history, itihas, gives us that, is a documentation of the transition as well of what has happened. And it is Ram Bhagwan who vanquished the Rakshas from the earth. When Sita is stolen, he he says, I will finish off all the Rakshas from this earth because the king of Rakshas has betrayed me. उसने छल से सीता को लिया है. They will not be left. And he makes this promise twice. One, because all the इन्होंने हमारे साधुओं को काट काट के मार मार करके हमारे ऋषिस को इनको हड्डियों का पहाड़ बनाया हुआ था. And he was devastated looking at it. So that is one part, and then Sita is the other. And that is why by the time you come to Mahabharat, there are hardly any Rakshas. Even for that matter, and we have one or two Rakshas only, which is like Hidim and Hidimba. And there are no worthy suitors for Hidimba. So when she sees Bhim, she's mesmerized because who's this handsome man? And she sees him as a mate. And then we have Hanumanji. Even by the time Mahabharat comes, he's one of the only ones of his kind who is left. There are no more Vanars. There's no description of it. So do you see the change that has happened? And in the Valmiki Ramayana itself, it is stated that to destroy Ravan, many devs had taken wives or had given their children or had children with the queens of the Vanars, with the queens of the Reach, to produce valorous sons who could fight Ravan, because Ravan had a boon. And in ancient times, the boons they took, they never thought that there'll be a human, a Vanar, or any of these lower species. They considered us lower species who could fight with them. So whenever they took boons, they said, there'll be no one who can kill us in day or in time. No God can kill us. No Dev can kill us, right? No Asur can kill us. No this can kill us. And they thought that humans and Vanar and all these are like low grade animals, low grade people, they can't harm us. That is the reason why they were given the strength. And when you read the Mahabharata as well, in order to defeat, I mean, so okay, it happens by chance, but in order to defeat the Kaurav, because the war was coming, who are the sons? Who are the fathers of these men? Arjun's father is Indra himself. Okay, Ashwini Kumar's children are the twins, right? Because Ashwini are twins. So Nakul Sadev, and they're very good with medicine. And then you have Dharmraj's putra, which is, Yudhishthir. So you see how they all, even then the gods have helped us to win wars. So for on the side of truth, on the side of humans, on the side of righteousness, the gods are always there.
This is absolutely fascinating, Ninaji. Um, I also wanted to know because it's also something very interesting when I was reading the book, your depiction of Ayodhya and the Valmiki Ramayana. How do they compare? How do you compare the findings that's discussed in your book with Valmiki Ramayana? Is there a link, or is there a structure to both, or how did you how is that worked out?
Okay, so my book has a narrative style. It is not an interpretation. So if I have taken a shlok out, I give the proof of that shlok in terms of meaning, in terms of data, in terms of pictures. So there are, for in earlier times we were told that Ramayana is only myth. There is nothing true to it. But I had traveled the ancient world so much, and once I started studying the Valmiki Ramayana, I realized that, oh, this is something I've seen here. So, for example, gold plated houses. I said, I've seen this in Peru. I have seen this here. And for example, pyramidal structured homes, which is Viman shaped homes, which is mentioned in Ayodhya. I have seen, the ancient world is full of pyramidal structures. Just take a look at Egypt. Just take a look at Mexico. They have pyramids, right? So my thing was that if it is written in the Valmiki Ramayana, and if I have seen it across the world, how is this a lie? And therefore, in my style of writing, what I have done is that I've given the Sanskrit shlok, which is from the Valmiki Ramayana. I have then given the meaning of it. I've explained it in detail, and then I have given praman, pratyaksh praman. So there are two kinds of praman that are very important for Hindus. One is shabdik praman. Shabdik praman means that it is written in scriptures in words, shabd likhe hue, right? And in scriptures, when we speak of scriptures, we don't mean just anybody's random thoughts. जो शास्त्र होते हैं, the shastra that we consider are important. Shastra is what men before us have experienced and written, and it's not the work of one man. It is a cumulative work of many men who have preceded us. So we have Shastric Praman or Shabdik Praman, and in Shabdik Praman, we take two Pramans in history, which is Ramayana and Mahabharat, because it is Itihas, Iti Ha As. This is how it happened. Only Hindu cultures says Satyamev Jayate, which is let only truth is victorious. Majority of the histories of other people, other cultures, and other religions is not rooted in truth as much as it is rooted in propaganda. For them, history is a way of propaganda. For us, history has to be truth. Therefore, we take evidence of Shabdik Praman as Mahabharat and Ramayana. And so I took this Shabdik Praman and I matched it with data, with charts, with numbers, and also Pratyaksh Praman. Pratyaksh Praman means what is in front of my eyes. Pratyaksh is that we can see directly. We don't need inference. ये अनुमान नहीं है, ये प्रत्यक्ष है. Pictures make for Pratyaksh Praman. Therefore, my book is full of pictures. So when I'm saying that it is written in the Valmiki Ramayana that there was a massive parikha, there was a parikha in Sanskrit means a moat. I have given pictures of moat from other cultures, and the detail of the moat is given that no animal can cross it, that they'll drown in it, that it's massive, right? And then we have more detail of moats in Chanakya. Chanakya talks about it, how to construct moats, how to have that, right? So in that he says that the moats should be covered in lotuses, and that you should keep magarmach, or you should keep these animals. Now if I read once I read that, I realized that I have been to the imperial city in China. So the imperial city in China, by the way, is also on the same Vastu pattern. And the imperial city, by the way, when you go there, the palace, there is swastik everywhere. There are layers and layers of swastik, and their auspicious color is red and gold, like similar to our auspicious color. So it's an exact copy of ours. Even in Japan, by the way, Japan has imported Hinduism in many ways. And it just makes my heart swell with pride that how much we have contributed to other cultures, right? And then the same thing. So even the moat of the imperial city has lotuses in it. And I have given these pictures from Japan to China as Pratyaksh Praman that look, you don't have to believe the Valmiki Ramayana, you don't, but these are the pictures. And so this is the narrative style that I have followed. So whatever I read in the Valmiki Ramayana, I saw the Praman in the rest of the world. And I had traveled this part of the world as a part of my interest. I was very interested in ancient cultures and understanding the past that we think that we have lost to the world. We haven't. We just need to match the dots.
Absolutely amazing to know that. I mean, especially the thing that you mentioned about China, and especially the colors, red and golden. That's exactly the colors in Sanatan, in our religion, the revered colors, the sacred colors that so, I mean, how do the local people there, I mean, are they aware of, the history and, maybe this has come from India or
Yeah.
what
Yes.
has been your experience like?
So I'll tell you something. I have been to China, and they're pretty much okay with Indians. They don't have a problem. At an intellectual level, the normal Chinese know that the normal Chinese are like us. At an intellectual level, they're fighting a battle to retain their originality and retain their culture and tradition, like we are, right? And not being absolutely taken by the mindlessness and the soullessness of the Western culture. And by the way, I'm not criticizing the Western culture. The Western culture has some many interesting and important things. But what is happening when we speak in a bad manner about the Western culture is that our people and our children are mimicking and taking the worst of their culture, not the best of their culture. So this is a problem that they face as well, on an intellectual level. And when it comes to the intellectual Chinese, they know and we know how much they have taken for us. In fact, in ancient times, I have spoken to other authors who have mastered in this. Do you know that they used to steal intelligent Indian men and take them to China and get them forcibly married to Chinese women? Yes, they used to do that. They used to take our, and in fact, many things in China, let's say, for example, Kung Fu, right? There was a Hindu rishi who's given them this knowledge and other things that they have taken from here. They have taken many things. And in ancient times, we used to have all the major schools wherein the Chinese, the Thai, the Cambodian, and from across the world, students used to come to study, much like what American universities today offer to the world.
Wow. I mean, this is definitely something that I had no idea about, this is absolutely fascinating. So thank you so much for sharing that, Neena ji. So next come, so when it comes Ayodhya, so you mentioned that the significance of Ayodhya was probably as great, if not greater, before the birth of Prabhu Sri Ram.
Yes.
So have there been any changes from, let's say, the pre-birth of Prabhu Sri Ram and his time and his era? I mean, did the city remain the same, or did it undergo any change? And what kind of changes did it go through throughout that era, throughout that age?
So we don't know how many times the city changed its shape, but it is written in the Valmiki Ramayana that during Dashrath's time, he expanded and resettled the city. Now with expand, and I, by the way, whatever I'm speaking about, this is given in Sanskrit shloks as Sanskrit shloks, and nobody needs to open the Valmiki Ramayana because it's not written reference this and this shlok. So you don't have to open it, you just read it there. So he says that he has expanded the kingdom, expanded the city. And why does he need to do that? Because when you expand your kingdom, there need to be more people settled in the city. You need a bigger city. Cities need to expand, right? So for example, in Delhi, the diplomatic center, which is the Puri, so even these concepts I've explained in detail in the book. So there is Nagar and then there is Puri. Nagar is the whole district and Puri is the capital of that district, or for that matter, Rajdhaniya Puri, which means the capital, which is the capital city of the country, right? It has a limited space. If you need to settle more people, for example, more diplomats and more kings to come and stay there, that means you need to expand. So even in a city like Delhi, they are making another diplomatic center in Dwarka. And the reason they are doing this is because the center of Delhi is very limited. And that's how, when in the ancient times, they were doing things. And this is when it says that Maharaja Dashrath has expanded the city and he wants to incorporate more people to come and live there. Because whenever there is a big ancient city, and it's mentioned in the book as well, that there were people coming to give tax, there were diplomats, there were different kinds of people coming for trade. So where do all these people live? They can't live outside the city. That means that the king has to make arrangements for it. So this is clearly mentioned. And this is one thing that I really appreciate about our culture, that our culture goes hand in hand with tradition as well as modernity. That even in ancient times, we were expanding and modernizing, and we must follow that pattern even today, and not to lose focus from our culture and our tradition while keeping it in hand, right? And we saw that, and Modi ji also says vikas bhi virasat bhi. So at the same time when the kumbh is going on, we have satellites that are joining in space, right, that are linking in space. And this is a perfect example of vikas bhi virasat bhi.
Bilkul, absolutely. So throughout your research, I mean, it has been extensive. I realize that. Have there been any one or two aspects about this book which is particularly close to your heart? I mean, which is something that when you found it or when you stumbled upon it, you were like, "Oh my God, this is huge. This is big." Is there
So
any one or two things which fascinated you completely?
So there were many parts that fascinated me. First was the military design of Ayodhya. We take a city, as you know, we can't imagine a modern city to have the kind of protection that Ayodhya had, right? I mean, you take a look at our cities. If there's an army coming in, it's gonna just race through. But Ayodhya, the reason Ayodhya is called Ayodhya, because it is a Yudhya. It cannot be fought. It cannot be assailed. It cannot be conquered. A Yudhya, that you cannot fight. And what was the reason for calling it Ayodhya? Ayodhya, right? The reason was that it was a military city. That is why it had a moat. It had high walls. It had ramparts. And on the ramparts, there are these mystical, magical weapons. They're not mystical, magical, but I'm just saying this because we have lost track of this ancient weaponry. And it says, सैकड़ों शतघ्नियां लगी हुई हैं. So when the description of Ayodhya comes, in the description of Ayodhya is that it has a big moat, and on the ramparts there are hundreds and hundreds. Sainkro is hundreds in Hindi. So there are hundreds and hundreds of shatagnis laid out, and obviously to protect the city. And moats in earlier times were very important because in earlier times the army was Chaturangi Sena. Chaturangi means that which has four limbs. The four limbs are cavalry, elephants, rath or chariots, and infantry. Now, these three limbs have animals in it. Only infantry is on foot, no animals in it, right? They're humans. So the reason they put a moat, because one of the first acts of defense or offense is that when there is an invading army, you split the army. And the reason to and the way to split an army is to have an obstacle there. So when you have a moat, the animals do not cross the moat. Humans can swim across, right? But the animals will not get into very deep waters because animals don't swim. Elephants, horses, they don't go swimming in water. And so therefore that is the reason they put in the moats, they had magarmach. And during the time in Ayodhya, they kept hippopotamus. And it is also mentioned in the Valmiki Ramayana that they were importing horses and hippopotamus and they were breeding them. They were also getting elephants and breeding them for the purposes of having them as animals, for having them as army, and for, even Ramji had a horse, sorry, had a pet elephant. His name was, yeah, he had a pet elephant. It's called Shatrunjay, and so many details are written about Shatrunjay. I have, by the way, all that I'm saying is mentioned in the book, and other fascinating details are mentioned in the book. So this was a concept that I just didn't imagine to be true. And do you know that even today, the modern India, in fact, all over the world, the army still follows these tactics. Yes, yes,
Really?
yes. The army still follows the tactics of creating obstacles. So today we have ditch come band. So ditch come band is something that you can make a ditch immediately if there's an invading army, and that is to stop the advancement of tanks. And so in ancient times, it would be to stop the advancement of rath, because they can be quite destructive, right? Soldiers on their foot will do, infantry can do this much damage. Then the other part was that Ayodhya was fully settled. There was no extra space. That meant how homes, gardens, temples, all of it was constructed, side by side, and there were farms, some in certain places. So what happens when a place is fully constructed is that if there is the infantry, if it invades your city, there is no place for it to fight. You cannot have an invading army that is fighting individually from home to home, from rooftop to rooftop. The invading army will die, you know. So this is the reason why Ayodhya was invincible. So these are the fascinating facts. Military design, this amazing weapon called Shatagni. The word Shatagni means 100, killer of hundreds. So when they used to blast these Shatagnis off, it used to kill the armies. Then you had the moat, the armies couldn't cross the moat. You had the importing of hippopotamuses. Then there's this concept of Viman. All the homes in Ayodhya were Viman structured. Now, what is a Viman? And it clearly mentions these are the flying weapons of the, these are the flying aircrafts of the gods, the flying. How the gods used to go from place A to place B. And I have not mentioned it, this part in the book. One of the things that is mentioned about the vimans of the gods, this much is mentioned, is that they are pyramidal in shape, and they were covered with gold and gemstones. Do you know, even today when we send satellites in space, we put gold foiling on. So when we send these spacecrafts, when we send these satellites and these things in space, they are gold plated, because one of the things that gold has, that it is a metal that doesn't tarnish quickly. It's not very reactive. It's a very, like, iron will corrode. It'll react to the stresses in the air, but gold doesn't lose its luster. It doesn't react, and it's a very, very stable metal as a covering. And if the ancients, thousands and thousands of years ago, are saying that our gods used to travel in these pyramidal structures, and they used to be gold plated, they were auspicious. And this is why even today in our temples, the god, the main deity, is always seated under a pyramidal structure, and it's called the Viman. And what we are trying to do is we are trying to mimic exactly that even today.
So you're saying that there is a direct relevance from some of these ancient traditions that probably took place thousands of years ago, and they hold true. They are relevant to this day.
Yes,
To
there are. And
Wow.
I'll tell you why. Because common sense doesn't change. Gold is common sense. It's a less reactive.
Absolutely.
You can't have an iron plated thing going in space which is going to go corrode up there. You cannot have a sulfur.
Mm.
It just makes sense to have these things. It just
But
makes
it's
sense.
yeah, but it's fascinating to know that something that probably the world is is doing or is aware of maybe a few decades ago. These are already written in our ancient scriptures
They are.
thousands of years ago.
Yes, in fact, we diss our scriptures, but when it comes to NASA, when it comes to scientists, when it comes to all these people in the West, the intellectuals, they look at our scriptures so that they can get ideas on how to advance. They get the insights that they want to use. So there are two ways that we can look at our ancient data. Either we can say this is all mythical, did not exist, and we can continue being dumb, or the smart amongst us are going to say, okay, what can I learn from them and why did they do this? And get inspired to create things in that manner. Because you see, I'll tell you something about human beings. Human emotion, so our clothes have changed, the way we commute has changed, and the way we communicate has changed, but human emotions and common sense is not going to change.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that. So, Ninaji, I also had, I was very curious to know that the in your book, the way you have described the urban planning, the social structure, and the living arrangement, the architecture of the city. Uh, when I was reading about it, it didn't feel as if I was reading about a city thousands of years ago or an ancient city. It felt, if you didn't mention the name Ayodhya, it would almost sound like any modern city of today. So is that how the structure was back then?
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
thousands of years ago, that's how the city was designed.
Yes, yes. This is how it was designed because in we get numerous references in our shastras, especially Vastu Shastra, and we also have other replicas across the world. So, for example, if you take a look at Angkor Wat is also made on Vastu. You see the rectangular pattern, and even Ayodhya was exactly like this, a moat, and the city is inside it. So you see, when they're telling us that Ayodhya had a moat, Ayodhya was rectangular, and the it was 12 by 3 yojan. It was made like this. It was made like this. They're not lying to us. And these kind of structures and patterns. Okay, we don't have the moats anymore, but every now we have pipelines. But you must notice that every city is made next to a river, whether it is London, whether it is Delhi, whether it is New York, whether it is whatever. New York is, by the way, an island in itself. So, so if you don't have a moat, you've made a city on an island. And these places do very well. According to Vastu Shastra, water is very important to enrich a city because it gives you dhan and dhanya, because you can't have crops without water. Humans need water to survive. And the modern city structure, the layout, in Ayodhya, you had these row houses, very, very meticulously planned in rows, in streets. And I mentioned the grid pattern networks. The grid pattern network we find in New York, we find in Dubai, we find in all these places. And it makes it very easy to commute north to south, east to west. So, for example, there is a war, and in earlier times, let's say in Ayodhya, there is a war. They did not have telephones. So, what that meant is somebody has to go physically and inform the people. So, if the attack has happened in the southernmost center, then the king cannot be in the northernmost center, in northernmost corner of the city. The king has to be in the center, right? So from anywhere there is an attack, then he can regroup. He can, so therefore all the ministers, all the diplomats, everybody stays together in the center, in the Puri. And the same concept you will see repeatedly across the world because it's just basic common sense. Even today in Delhi, we have Chanakya Puri. Now, pay attention to the name. It's Chanakya's capital. In Chanakya Puri, you have the PM's residence, you have Everybody who's important, who's residents, all the ministers, the diplomats, the senior most in army, the senior most is officers, all of them, they stay in that part of the capital, the Puri. So Chanakya Puri is to India is what Ayodhya Puri was to Kosal kingdom, or was to Kosal. So you see how they're even linked today.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, my next question to you was that the ancient wisdom of Ayodhya, whatever you've researched, how is it relevant to the modern times? Do you think there is a relevance, there is a link, or what can the modern world learn from the ancient city wisdom of Ayodhya?
So again, I'll say the same thing. See, what happens is that when we so these because of our these books are itihas, and then there is shastra, and I've explained shastra is what people before us. It is the cumulative knowledge or the experience of the people before us, the wise people before us, which is documented and given to us, right? And human beings have changed the way they dress up, the way they move in cars, and the houses they live in. They may have changed the shape, they may have changed the things, but human emotion and common sense has not changed. And therefore, what has been in practice and has been successful all over all these ancient years, a lot of that wisdom has to work even today because they made it on common sense. Understand what I'm saying? So, in the ancient time as well as today, we should learn to incorporate the wisdom of our sages and the wisdom of what is written in our scriptures, because it will benefit us. Now, if Delhi was a grid pattern network, how easy would it be to commute in Delhi? I mean, if you take a look at Dubai, Abu Dhabi, or if you take a look at New York, they're all grid pattern cities. Even Chandigarh is grid pattern. It's so much easier to travel in these places. New York is one of the easiest places to travel in. And even their network, the metro system works very well. So when the West either knowingly or unknowingly copies our designs, it becomes a successful story. But somehow we don't copy it, we don't make those cities, and therefore as a result we suffer. So there is a lesson for us to imbibe that practical wisdom from our ancients and apply it to modern day India as well, if we want to grow and rise fast.
That is exactly what I mean I just mentioned that there have been so many knowledge, wisdom, information, be it science, technology, astrology, astronomy, you name it, medicine, it's all there in our ancient scriptures. But
Yes.
somehow till the time we get a validation from the West, we kind of we feel that, so yeah, I completely agree with you that whatever we need to in order to live a healthy, balanced life, I think it all exists in our scriptures. We just have to read them and incorporate it.
Do
So
you, do
our
you know,
yeah.
before we end, I'll give you a little insight. Do you know
Mm.
they consider astrology as superstition, but mathematics is science? Do you know where mathematics came from?
I'm, I'm aware that it came from India, but I don't know. I must, yeah, maths has come
Mathematics,
from.
mathematics was derived from astrology. In order to uh, keep a track of the stars and keep track of time, because time for us is not isolation.
Mhm.
This time of 8 o'clock 9 o'clock doesn't make sense, but this time of this is, when somebody is born, this is the position of planets. That is more accurate by saying someone is born at 9 o'clock in Delhi. Because tomorrow, if we lose the track of time, like what is 9 o'clock, we lose GMT, okay, then who knows who was born at what time? But the Hindu Kundli, how it is positioned, is more accurate. And therefore, in order to have the timing accurate, that is why they invented mathematics in order to calculate. And that is why zero comes after nine, like 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10. So zero comes there, and our counting starts from one. So when a child is born, it says pehla saal. When you have your first birthday, they say dusra saal lag gaya hai. You see? And then zero. What is the concept of zero coming after nine? Why did zero not come after five? Why did zero not, we didn't need to put 10. This sounds very vague, and a lot of people cannot figure it out, that zero has to come after nine. That is because in astrology, the most important planets that influence our system, that influence our kundli or our lives, and our lives in Ayurveda is given up to 100 years. Therefore, we do not take Neptune, Pluto, and other planets as affecting us as much, because their movement is more than 100 years. So if my lifetime is still 100 years, they become irrelevant to our existence, right? So nine planets, because in Vedic astrology, the sun is number one, the most important for us, because had it not been for the sun, we wouldn't be there. The second is moon, and then you have Jupiter, and I'm just giving you randomly, and then you have all the seven planets, and then Rahu Ketu, and then you have Shunya. And what is Shunya? Shunya is the vast nothingness. And that is and do you know who has banned astrology? One of the people to ban astrology were the communists in Russia. There was a very famous astrologer who said that all these revolutions happen because of sun cycles. There are these particular cycles that the sun goes through. In Hindi, I mean Sanskrit, we call them ketus. So the solar flares, the maximum solar flares, and all these things that happen. So we call them ketu. All the solar flares and the dots that we see on the sun are, we call them ketu. Ketu is not only the shadow of the earth, right? And he jailed this scientist, he jailed this researcher, because he thought that humans were leading revolutions. So communists banned the study of astrology and said mathematics is fine. And in fact, the Aryabhat who invented zero was actually an astrological mathematician.
It's absolutely mind-boggling. Absolutely mind-boggling. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me at all that so all the ancient wisdoms, all the knowledge that we have acquired, that we know of today, somewhere the origins are in our ancient scriptures. I mean, that's something that with each and every passing day I'm realizing. So
Yes, even for that matter, hora, the word hour, Hour, comes from the word hora in Spanish, Hora, which comes from the Sanskrit hora, which means aho ratri. So ho from aho and ratri ra, ho ra. And that divides the whole day according to the planetary influence in an hour or so's time whose hora is running. So in a whole day, you have around approximately all the planetary horas coming twice, once in the day and once at night. So they cover all the horas like this. So can you imagine the days of the week, the hours of the day, everything, the number, the numerical system, zero, all of it comes from Hindu scriptures. All of it comes from the study of Hindus. Mathematics comes from Hindus. And it is no wonder that Hindus do so well in STEM subjects.
it's imbibed in us. No matter what the world thinks, it's imbibed in us.
Correct.
Uh, just last couple of questions, Neena ji. So, when it comes to the ancient city of Ayodhya, do we see any reference or any, for that matter, anything that remains about of that ancient, uh, whatever was there in those ancient times to today? Do we get to see today's Ayodhya and ancient Ayodhya? I'm I'm not I'm not asking specifically about the city structure and all that, of course, but are there any ancient traditions or ancient culture or something that used to happen back then? It's still continuing today. Are there any instances of that in your
That was
book?
correct. Yes, yes. So, for example, welcoming people with flowers.
Oh, okay.
So that
Okay.
was it. Yeah. So when we throw flowers on people to welcome them, and even songs like "Baharon Phool Barsao Mera Mehboob Aaya Hai," on the wedding night, the bed is full of flowers, rose petals, and then when the bride comes home, there is rangoli, and all of this. When somebody comes home, we throw flowers at them. So this is one thing that I noticed that was there in Ayodhya, as well as, and practiced then and even practiced today. Music, music, dance, drama, the way we design our houses, all of it used to come from, we follow those traditions even today. And keeping cows at home. So, they said that Ayodhya was a very wealthy city, and that every house had at least a cow and a horse. And so, cow and a horse are very important, because cow gives, from the cow we get milk products and stuff, which are very important for health and nutrition. And then we have a horse. That meant that in today's world, the minimum a house had was at least a bike. So there was nobody poor. So Rath was, let's say, your expensive cars of the days, which the ministers and everybody, which the sort of wealthier people would have. And then you had horses, which is bigger than a bike, but I'm just giving you, like, the kind of correlation. So we notice these things and the same culture, the same concepts that we should have even today. And these are, I thought, very fascinating. And you can see more details in the book as well.
And as far as the city is concerned, post Ramayana, did it manage to hold on to its all its tradition, all its grandeur, or all the things that it was pre-Ramayana? Post Ramayana, do we see anything change, or the city
Yes.
remained?
No, the city changed. So
Okay.
during the Ramayanic era, we have the description of Ayodhya as in a rectangular city. So I'm just using my phone as a symbol. So 3 by 12, let's say. This is just an average, this is not to scale. Post Ramayan, when it comes to Skand Puran, so it is mentioned it became like a fish. It's shaped like a fish. Now, that is a natural occurrence if the moat is not maintained. So, for example, when the river water is harvested to go around like a moat, when there's too much of pressure and silt, so one side, if let's say it's coming from the top, then this side will keep eroding, and therefore, so the water will flow like this, and therefore the erosion will happen on these sides, and then it becomes like a fish. So we have this description that this is what this, because, and I'm saying this is because it's very practical. I've seen so many pictures of ancient civilizations, Dholavira and Rakhigari, and this one and that one, and you'll notice that slight erosion if it's not maintained, right? And so we have the description. Then the last description that we hear is that, I think it is Panini who has said that the Yamans have taken and destroyed Ayodhya. Then many years later, Ayodhya is resettled and recreated by another king, and that is absolutely fascinating. So when they excavated Babri, underneath they found the remnants of this ancient temple. And when I saw the marks on the temple, when I saw the decoration on the temple, I noticed that these are the kind of decorations that are mentioned in the Valmiki Ramayana. So, for example, they say that on the pillars there are flower pattern made. There's flowers made, and then there is this, and then there's toran, and there is this. And I noticed that being here as well. And ancient Ayodhya Vasis were very proud, and they were always furling the flag from their flag. They were nationalists, and they were, the flags were always, hanging from the minarets, the towers, the homes, and the people were a happy people. So this is, they're very devoted to Ram and Dashrath and all the other brothers.
Oh, wow. What about any next chapter coming on Ayodhya, Dinaji?
I, you know
I
what
for
I
one can't wait to read more if you have because the kind of research that you've done on this one, as I keep saying, that for us we got it easy. We just got a book which had everything in it, such fascinating history, and we just got everything in 3 hours. But for you, it's probably years of dedication, research, hard work. But still, we crave for knowledge, and so I really can't let you go without asking you that what's next?
so
What can we hope?
I have been writing articles, and what I've been putting it here and there. And what I'll do now is that I'll start collecting these articles on my Twitter account. So just keep a track of my Twitter account, and I'll start writing these very, very interesting inputs on the ancient world as well as astrology and other things. There is a lot of demand. They ask me to come and speak on it. They ask me to do that, but it takes so much energy to even sit,
That's
research, find the shlok, find the reference, find a picture, explain to them. Because what happens is that once you start studying, you keep joining the dots. Then you realize that you're able to join the dots in your mind, but to the reader, he's a novice. He doesn't know, or she doesn't know. Therefore, you have to explain the whole thing to them. How does A link to B link to C link to D link to E? So I try and do this. And because you've requested, I'll try and be more regular with my writing and start whatever I'm researching, I'll put it out. And what I'll do is I'll share it with you, because a lot of people do request, please share your, insights with us. We really
absolutely,
enjoy the work.
absolutely. I would
So
love that. I would love that.
I'll send them
Um,
across to you. Keep a track of my Twitter articles as well.
I would, absolutely, I would. Um, on that note, Neena ji, thank you so much for a very enlightening conversation. I mean, most of the things I had no idea about, and I'm sure whoever is going to be watching this would find it equally interesting and exciting and informative. About our ancients, about our scriptures, about our history, about our tradition, about everything, about our religion. So thank you so much. I will definitely, stay in touch and I will follow you. And we look forward to, reading a lot more of your writing. Please keep writing. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
so
for your time. Thank
much.
you.
Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram. Jai Shri Ram.